All right. So here is what is happening in Cameroon right now, and I need you to pay very close attention to this, because what we are witnessing is not just one crisis. It is multiple crisis points colliding at the exact same moment, in ways that raise some very hard questions about justice, about timing, and about what happens when a country's legal system and its streets are both under extreme pressure simultaneously. The Supreme Court of Cameroon has just announced that it will finally hear the appeal of jailed Ambazonian leader Julius Ayuk Tabe and 9 others on December 18. I am talking about 5 full years after these men were sentenced to life in prison. 5 years. That is not a short procedural delay. That is half a decade of sitting in Kondengui Central Prison, while their appeal gathered dust in the system. And this announcement is coming at the exact same time that hundreds of Cameroonians are sitting behind bars following deadly post-election protests that erupted after the disputed October presidential election. These are technically 2 different events separated by years, but when you put them side by side, when you look at the timing and the context and what is actually happening on the ground right now, you start to see something deeper about how Cameroon's institutions function when they are facing political pressure. On one track, you have this long-delayed Supreme Court hearing that has suddenly resurfaced after years of complete silence, and it raises immediate questions about procedure, about justice, and frankly about why a case that met all the technical requirements years ago is only now getting scheduled for review. On another track, you have military courts processing protesters who were arrested after President Paul Biya was declared the winner of an election that his main opponent insists was stolen. You have reports of selective releases where some detainees walk free while others remain locked up. You have conflicting death tolls where the government says one number and opposition groups and international organizations are saying something completely different. You have mass detentions happening across multiple cities, with people being held in police stations, gendarmerie compounds, and central prisons under conditions that have been condemned by human rights organizations for years. I am not here to speculate or jump to conclusions because we are following the facts as they stand right now. We are looking at court filings, official statements, verified timelines, and what authorities have actually acknowledged on record. What I want to understand, and what I want you to understand as we walk through this, is why a case that sat completely untouched for 5 years is now moving forward. Why some detainees are being freed while others remain locked in facilities across Cameroon. And what it means when legal action and political unrest collide at the exact same time in a country that is already dealing with a separatist conflict that has killed more than 6,000 people since 2017. This is a developing story with real consequences for the prisoners involved, for the credibility of Cameroonian institutions, and for a country that is under serious strain. In the next several minutes, we are going to walk through what has happened, what is currently unfolding right now, and what remains unanswered. No noise, no slogans, no jumping ahead of the facts. Let's get into it. So the timeline itself raises immediate questions. Julius Ayuk Tabe and his co-defendants were arrested in Nigeria back in January 2018. They were transferred to Cameroon under circumstances that were later ruled illegal by Nigerian courts and condemned by United Nations human rights bodies. Now I am seeing a very clear parallel here with what just happened in Nigeria last month with Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. Kanu also went through illegal rendition, in his case from Kenya. He was held in detention for more than 4 years during a prolonged trial, and finally he was sentenced to life imprisonment in November. The parallels are striking because these are both separatist leaders, both illegally renditioned from neighboring countries, both facing terrorism charges, both sentenced to life in prison after trials where their defense lawyers walked out citing judicial bias and procedural violations. I am drawing this parallel because Nigeria is battling a separatist movement in the southeast of the country, and Cameroon is battling its own separatist movement in the Anglophone regions. The playbook appears remarkably similar. By August 2019, Ayuk Tabe and his co-defendants were sentenced to life in prison by a military tribunal. Their defense lawyers walked out of the trial in protest, exactly like Kanu's legal representatives removed themselves from the process shortly before his sentencing. They cited judicial bias and procedural violations, and they refused to participate further. The court proceeded anyway. It handed down convictions on charges including terrorism, secession, hostility against the state, and propagation of false news. An appeal was lodged shortly after the verdict. The Court of Appeal reviewed the case and upheld the military court ruling. The legal team then escalated the matter to the Supreme Court, which under Cameroonian law serves as the highest judicial authority and the final domestic avenue for review. That was years ago. For more than 5 years, nothing moved. No hearing date, no substantive review, just complete silence. Then in mid-December 2025, the court suddenly places this case back on its calendar. That sudden scheduling becomes the first major unresolved question. Why now? Why after 5 years of complete inaction? What triggered the system to resume processing an appeal that procedurally should have been advanced long ago? But here is where it gets more complicated. The trial itself, in 2019, proceeded under circumstances that defense lawyers and international observers have consistently called into question. The High Court convened hearings beginning in late 2018. Charges included terrorism, financing terrorism, secession, insurrection, and propagation of false news. Defense counsel raised objections early on, challenging the court's jurisdiction and alleging bias from the presiding judge. When those objections were overruled, the entire defense team withdrew from the proceedings in protest. The court did not stop. It continued the trial in the absence of legal representation for the defendants. By August 2019, verdicts were handed down in a hearing that stretched past dawn, concluding at around 5:30 in the morning. All 10 defendants received life sentences. They were also ordered to pay fines totaling approximately 250 billion CFA francs, which translates to about $422 million in civil damages to the government, plus additional court costs. The defense appealed the ruling. The Court of Appeal reviewed the case and upheld the original verdict. The legal team then filed with the Supreme Court. That filing occurred years ago. The court acknowledged receipt and then did nothing. International bodies have since weighed in on the unnecessary delay. The United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention issued warnings, declaring the detention arbitrary and calling for the immediate release of Ayuk Tabe and his co-defendants. Those warnings carry legal weight under international human rights frameworks, but they remain completely unimplemented. The Supreme Court hearing, scheduled for December 18, is procedurally significant because it represents the last judicial checkpoint within Cameroon before the only remaining recourse becomes executive action, either through presidential pardon or continued incarceration. But Cameroon is not the only country where this case remains active. These same Ambazonian leaders currently facing life sentences in Cameroon are also the subject of a separate Supreme Court case in Nigeria. Nigerian federal courts have previously ruled on the legality of their arrest and deportation. In March 2019, a federal high court in Abuja declared the extradition illegal and unconstitutional. The court ordered the immediate release and return of the detainees to Nigeria, along with compensation for violations of their rights. The ruling cited breaches of Nigerian domestic law and international refugee protections. The Nigerian government did not comply with that order. Instead, it appealed the ruling. The case is now before Nigeria's own Supreme Court, where it remains pending. What we have here is a legal standoff across two judicial systems. The detainees remain in Kondengui Central Prison in Yaoundé. Cameroon has not acknowledged the Nigerian court ruling in any substantive way, nor has it indicated any willingness to comply with orders issued by Nigerian judges. The Nigerian government has also taken no public action to secure the return of individuals its own court declared were illegally removed from the country. Two Supreme Courts, one in Cameroon and one in Nigeria, are now positioned to issue potentially conflicting rulings on the same individuals. Cameroon's December 18 hearing focuses on the substance of the criminal charges. Nigeria's pending case centers on jurisdictional and procedural legality. The outcomes could affirm each other, contradict each other, or pass each other by entirely. While judges deliberate on cases years old, unrest inside Cameroon has produced a new wave of arrests. At least 50 people arrested during post-election protests in Cameroon were brought before a military court this week. Why military courts for what appears to be a civil matter involving protests over election results? These are the questions many people, including myself, are asking. Around 30 people were remanded in custody, while others were released. The arrests followed demonstrations triggered by the announcement of results from Cameroon's October 12 presidential election. The Constitutional Council declared 92-year-old President Paul Biya the winner with 53.6% of the vote. His main challenger, former government minister Maurice Kamto, was credited with 35.1%. Kamto rejected the results immediately. He claimed he had secured more than half of the vote based on tally sheets his team collected from polling stations. He called for protests and declared himself the rightful winner of the election. Demonstrations erupted in multiple cities shortly after, including the economic hub of Douala and the northern city of Garoua. Security forces responded with tear gas, water cannons, and live ammunition. Arrests followed almost immediately. By mid-December, legal sources and civil society organizations estimated that more than 1,000 people remained in detention across the country in connection with post-election unrest. The exact figure is difficult to verify because detainees have been held in various facilities, including police stations, gendarmerie compounds, and central prisons. Some have been brought before military courts, which have jurisdiction over offenses related to public order and state security. On December 12 and 13, military prosecutors in Yaoundé processed around 50 detainees. Approximately 30 people were remanded in custody at Condengui prison, while others were released. The criteria for release were not publicly disclosed. Lawyers representing the defendants have called for their outright acquittal, arguing that peaceful protest is a constitutional right. But arrests are only part of the story because deaths are being disputed as well. The government says at least 5 people were killed during post-election protests. Opposition groups insist the number is far higher. The official death toll was later revised upward, and by mid-November, government officials updated the figure to 16. 16 real human beings died in the aftermath of an election. Opposition sources and civil society organizations have consistently cited higher numbers, with some claiming as many as 55 people died. Data from 2 United Nations sources estimate that at least 48 civilians were killed during the demonstrations. Human Rights Watch documented cases of security forces firing live ammunition into crowds, leaving dozens with gunshot wounds. The discrepancy between official figures and independent estimates has become a flashpoint in the ongoing dispute over election legitimacy. The arrests began immediately after the October 12 election. Kamto declared victory on October 14, just 2 days after polls closed, based on results his team compiled from individual polling stations. The Electoral Commission and ruling party dismissed his claims as premature and illegitimate. Provisional results released on October 20 showed Biya winning with about 53% of the vote. The Constitutional Council confirmed those results on October 27. Protests intensified after the official announcement. Videos circulated showing roadblocks, burning tires, and confrontations between demonstrators and security forces. Authorities described the protests as illegal gatherings organized by groups seeking to destabilize the country. International organizations expressed concern. The European Union and African Union called for restraint and respect for human rights. Human Rights Watch accused Cameroonian security forces of using excessive and lethal force against civilian demonstrators. The government defended its actions, saying it was responding to violent mobs and illegal activity. Behind the political crisis, detainees remain inside overcrowded prisons, some under extreme conditions. Civil society groups say more than 1,000 people remain detained in Cameroon following post-election unrest. Condengui Central Prison, where many are held, has long been the subject of international criticism for severe overcrowding and harsh conditions. Built in 1967 to house about 1,500 inmates, the facility now holds more than 6 times that capacity. Amenities are minimal. Toilets, beds, and basic sanitation are inadequate for the population. Human rights organizations have documented torture, incommunicado detention, and denial of medical care at facilities linked to the Condengui complex. Detainees report being held without access to lawyers for extended periods, in violation of domestic and international legal standards. Among those currently held are individuals arrested during previous political crises. Supporters of Maurice Kamto were detained after the 2018 election and remained in custody for months before being released. Journalists, Activists and civil society members have been imprisoned on charges related to public order and state security. The post-election detainees now join that population. Lawyers report that many have not been brought before a judge as required under Cameroonian law. Military courts have processed some cases, while others remain in limbo. Calls for clemency are growing louder, particularly for elderly detainees. One prominent opposition figure, 74-year-old Jean-Michel Ninchu, died in detention on December 1 after his family and lawyers said he was denied adequate medical care. His death intensified public anger and raised further questions about conditions inside detention facilities. On December 18, Cameroon's Supreme Court is expected to hear a case that has remained unresolved for more than 5 years. The legal options before the court are clear. It can uphold the lower court ruling affirming the life sentences handed down in 2019. It can order a retrial citing procedural irregularities or jurisdictional issues. It can overturn the convictions entirely, leading to the release of Ayuk Tabe and his co-defendants. Or it can delay the matter further, requesting additional review or documentation. Each outcome carries consequences. An affirmation of the verdict will close the final domestic legal avenue, leaving only presidential pardon or international pressure as remaining options. A retrial will reopen questions about military court jurisdiction over civilians and the fairness of proceedings conducted without defense counsel. A full reversal will have immediate political implications, potentially shifting dynamics in the ongoing Ambazonian conflict. The timing of this hearing, coming amid post-election unrest and mass detentions, adds weight to the moment. The Supreme Court's credibility is currently under scrutiny. Public trust in judicial institutions has declined in recent years. Many Cameroonians now view the courts as extensions of executive power rather than independent arbiters of justice. International observers will be watching closely. The United Nations has already declared the detention arbitrary. Nigerian courts have ruled the extradition illegal. Civil society organizations have called for the immediate release of the Ambazonian leaders and all political prisoners. December 18 represents a test of whether Cameroon's legal system can function independently when handling politically sensitive cases. For the detainees themselves, the stakes are existential. Ayuk Tabe has spent more than 6 years in Kondengui prison, maintaining that his arrest and trial violated both Cameroonian and international law. December 18 is not just a court date, it is a convergence point for multiple crises: legal, political, and humanitarian. Whether the Supreme Court acts decisively or continues, the pattern of delay will signal much about the state of institutions in a country under growing strain. After years of silence, the question is no longer whether this case exists, it is whether the system will finally act on it. This is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view, where we talk about stories that mainstream media rarely covers with the kind of depth and detail we bring here. If you are in Cameroon, go to the comment section and tell us what you think about all of this. Tell us if you believe the system can deliver justice in cases like these. And if you want to continue seeing content like this, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss an episode. I am still your host, Ezeka, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.